This is my friend Utsav, who I met at the Rage Against the War Machine rally last year. And he is the leader of Hindus for America First. And he is going to talk to us about Kamala Harris. Welcome. How are you?
Hey, Caleb. Nice to see you. It's an
Nice
honor
to
to
see
be on
you
your
as well.
program. Love your show. It's wonderful. And you guys do a lot of great work in terms of uncovering some of the corruption that goes on in the deep state.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Well, I met you at the Rage Against the War Machine rally, and we had a real connection, despite being from different ends of the political spectrum. We're both anti-war. We both really don't like what the deep state is doing and persecuting and taking away Americans' rights and funding terrorism around the world and such. So, and we talked, and you as an Indian American, Kamala Harris can't make up her mind, right? Is she an Indian American, a Jamaican American, or an African American? What do you think?
Yeah, it's a very interesting story. So when Kamala Harris was running for district attorney of San Francisco and attorney general and senator, she would, when fundraising, she would select Indian communities to go to and raise a lot of money and identify as Indian. But the vast majority of the time, especially in public, she'd identify as of Afro-Caribbean heritage. And it just was a bit stinging because the issue is that you have a lady like her that is kind of selective on her identity. And it's almost as if she is like a Justin Trudeau, dawning on a cultural identity that is of her particular interest and taste, given the way that the political situation is ebbing and flowing in her environment. And it's just very superficial. Like an ethnic identity is not a prop. It's a part of you. It's your ancestry. It's your culture. It's even your nation. It's your value system. This isn't something that should be disrespected so much. And this is my big critique of this cultural Marxism, where race, identity, it's just like a secondary, tertiary thing. And I don't mean to offend your viewers,
You're
but
not at all. Go
I,
on. We are very critical of that CIA cultural Marxism, all of that Frankfurt School stuff,
yeah,
So I don't think you're offending our viewers at all. Please continue.
yeah,
Say
and
say more.
definitely the 1930s Frankfurt School nonsense. Basically, it's just honestly all about uh, building up these identities that are not all necessarily true and real. And it appears to me that the deep state has utilized these identities as a way to argue for persecution of, argue that they ought to be intervening in countries based on supposed groups being persecuted.
Right.
And they just make up one thing after the other. I'm not saying that there are no LGBTs or something like this, but you notice it's like plus, and
Right.
they add more to this, more to this, more to this. And it's just really, what is it about at the end of the day? Uh it's really about politics when it comes to it. I mean, I don't doubt that people who are homosexual have real struggles. I don't doubt that people who are trans have real problems in their lives. And I have a lot of compassion and empathy for people. But the way it's been politicized, the way human rights has been weaponized, it's been done with an ulterior motive, which is to invade countries, destroy countries, steal their resources, and plunder them. We see this in Syria, for example, where our country is stealing Syria's oil. We did this in the name of fighting ISIS, which I thought was noble, which is why I supported some intervention. But then when I saw that we're allowing Erdogan to profit handsomely off of the instability of Syria, the Kurds that are suffering, when I saw that the oil is being stolen from the Syrian people to companies that are already handsomely profiting, it was very distressing. And
Yeah.
though I identify from the political right, I am a populist, and I support the people.
Well, it's interesting because Kamala and her camp and they're making a big deal about supposedly Russia helped some YouTube channel or something. But, as somebody whose background is from India, Kamala Harris's niece lives in India and is actively working with the State Department and other forces to destabilize the country and work against the president, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Well, I don't know if she lives in India, but what I do know is that she has a very ugly history of attacking Hindus that disagree with her and calling them Hindu extremists. And this is what she said a few years ago when the Indians were up in arms, not all of them, but some of them were up in arms over the living and working conditions of farmers. And there was a concern about, how to get their crops to market without facing all these kind of loosening of tariffs, which were detrimental to some of those farmers. And some of those farmers engaged in anarchy and violence, and there were a lot of elements that took advantage of the security situation there. Now, initially, it was presented as a left-wing populist movement, but it had a lot of contours of liberal woke nonsense. There were a lot of separatist elements that got involved in this, and a lot of political parties in the West decided to fan the flames, and a lot of left-wing NGOs, all from the West, all decided to pile on. And the goal was to make Modi look bad. The goal was to create insurrection in India. And what started as a very noble protest for farmers' rights, the working classes people's rights, it ended up becoming some other thing, some weird thing. And so Mina hijacked herself, implanted herself into this.
Yeah, this is Mina Harris, Kamala's niece. Mina
Correct.
Harris, that's the name. Okay, just to clarify, continue.
And Mina Harris not only is the niece, she's an Ivy League educated woman, very intelligent. She participated in the Democratic National Convention as a star. She did a very interesting dance. And she opines quite a lot on Twitter. She's very close to Maya Harris, her mother. And, Maya Harris is the sister of Kamala. People remember that Maya Harris was a policy advisor for Hillary Clinton and a number of prominent Democrats. So this is a very strong family. I believe Axios or Politico has said that Maya, Kamala, and Mina are inseparable. This is not a direct quote. This is it's not verbatim. This is me paraphrasing from the article. It talked about how the three girls are peas in a pod, and that's how family members of Kamala Harris has described the three girls. And so there's a lot to learn about this Mina, because this lady, she has said some very nasty things about the adherents of Hindus, of the Hindu religion. Again, during this farmers' protest, when she was getting bombarded by comments, so Mina Harris had been attacking Modi, she got bombarded by people from India, and she called those Hindus who were attacking her, criticizing her, as Hindu extremists, and she just labeled them. Now the thing is, like, Hindus can't be extreme because Hinduism is not a traditional organized religion. It is a syncreticist religion of many worldviews, philosophies, belief systems. It's not like Catholicism, where there's a central church and there's a pope, there's bishops, there's a whole hierarchy. This is a very decentralized religion with different texts, different myths that are rooted in the lands of India. And it's very cultural in many ways. Some are more deeply intertwined with the texts, and there's just not a real fundamental consensus in Hinduism about a lot of things. So you can't be an extremist, because it's hard to be, extreme on a faith that's very open to a lot of differing views. It's just a very ignorant remark. And also, those who disagree with you call them extremists. Like, why insult the whole religion? It's offensive.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's very bizarre. In the book Amateur Hour, which is, my book and that book are the only two like critical books about Kamala Harris that have ever been published. In that book, they talk about Kamala Harris invoking the deity Kali, and saying that, what's going on there? What's that about?
So she believes that she is Kali Ma, or Ma Kali, and Kali is a goddess who has basically turned herself into the slayer of demons, and she appears more scary than what other deities would look like. And the reason for that is because she is trying to basically scare those demons, and she's trying to slay them.
Okay.
And that's why you have these portraits of her where she looks very menacing. She's not demonic. She's actually not an evil entity or being. Okay. She just appears to be very intimidating and threatening, so that she can scare the actual demons. Okay. And she slays them. Okay. And with Kamala Harris, she wants to be seen as as this great goddess, because she's trying to appeal to these Hindus. She's trying to win their votes. She's trying to get their donations. She's trying to look larger than life.
Wasn't it
But
a bit self-centered to compare
yes,
yourself to a god? Like, I
it
mean,
is. It's very offensive, and I'm not politically correct, but I am a God-believing man, and I do. And our group is about Hindus for America first. So we're Hindus across America who support President Trump and the Republican Party, and we're trying to create a space within the Republican Party for various Hindus, and we want there to be religious tolerance, harmony, and peace. And we see these actions, and it's like somebody saying, "I'm Jesus."
yeah,
It's like Jesus is like the perfect embodiment of God. He's perfect. He's impeccable. I even love Jesus. I respect Jesus. And how you can compare yourself to Jesus is sickening. How you can compare yourself to Ma Kali is also sickening. Like, humans are mortals. We're imperfect. We're flawed. We're deeply, deeply flawed. God is perfect. God is supreme. And it just goes to show you that Kamala Harris is just a very crazy politician. She gives me psychopathic, sociopathic vibes, similar to Hillary Clinton. There's a lot of comparisons between the two, which I know you've spoken about in your book, which is a great book, which I encourage people to buy and read.
Well, you mentioned that you had some new information or something to share with the viewers about Kamala Harris. So I guess I let them know that was coming. So maybe I should just go ahead and ask you what is this new information you're going to present?
Sure. So I recently had been uncovering certain policies about Kamala Harris, and a very interesting video came to my attention. Approximately around September 2019, in Houston, Texas, Kamala Harris attended an event where she was asked about the human rights situation in Indian Kashmir. And there was some questions about how India had been regulating the internet services, the security forces, and Kamala Harris responded to the question in a very strange way, kind of like a lawyer. She talked about a hypothetical where she talked about how a country can be like an abuser, where they would basically commit crimes, get away with it, and they would keep doing these crimes until and they would just keep on getting away with it because of their power and they're abusing somebody. They're going to have all this control and sway, and essentially they're going to keep on doing what they're doing because of that power complex. And so, in a sense, she compared India to an abuser, which I thought was bizarre because the Kashmir conflict is very complicated. The fact is, the Indian government is actually trying to protect minority rights, the minority Hindus, Sikhs, Jains, Buddhists. They're trying to protect moderate Muslims, all Muslims, against Islamic extremist elements that originate from Pakistan. And they're also trying to protect the people from, I'm sorry to say this, you might take offense, the People's Republic of China, which has historically entrenched on, hoisted itself on Indian territory and has acted, at least from my point of view and the perspective of many other academics, very aggressively towards the Indians. And, I think that to hear remarks about India being an abuser is very bizarre. I don't understand how anyone can't figure that out. It's much more complicated. Not to get too much into the history of India, but I'll just say one or two quick points here, and then go to the main subject. The internal security forces of India, right? They're run by the Jammu and Kashmir police. They're the ones that are policing a lot of the folks there. Now, there have been issues of abuse. There have been issues of like law and order and governance, and no country is perfect, but all countries are collectively working on human rights. And the thing is that India is on the front line against two nuclear powers. It is a war zone. Make no mistake about it. Many people have died because of it. And continuing on Kamala here, she then talked about how there might be a need to actually intervene in the region. And that is the key thing that's really frustrating, that she's talked about intervening in a global hotspot where there's three nuclear powers all contesting for this land. what does intervening mean? What does intervention mean? We need some clarity. This has not been brought to the Western media. This
Well,
has been talked about.
officially, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't the United States neutral on the Kashmir issue?
Yes. And the thing is that there is a UN resolution that acknowledges that India and Pakistan are both working on the issue of Kashmir. There's a thing called a Shimla Accord or Shimla Agreement where India and Pakistan, at the conclusion of the 1971 war, these two countries would work together to solve the Kashmir issue. And it's not for anyone else to get involved in. And this is an internal affair between these two countries. So to have Kamala come out and say that she will get involved in this conflict is very, very concerning. And this reminds me about what we did in Ukraine. We color revolutioned them. We supported the fascists, neo-Nazis, Azov Battalion, Adar, Right Sector. We put in people that we fought against in World War II in power in Ukraine. And what happened to Viktor Yanukovych was unacceptable, no matter what you thought of his views.
Right.
And even the way he was removed from power was unconstitutional, by the way. And the issue is that Kamala has talked about doing this intervention. Now, I take those words from 2019 very seriously because right now what is going on in the world is very interesting. Bangladesh is burning. There's an ongoing pogrom of Hindu minorities right now. There was a government, and I'm going to come back to Kamala in one moment, but there's a government, there was a government led by a secular social democrat who was critical of U.S. hegemony in the subcontinent region. Her name is Sheikh Hasina. Sheikh Hasina was resisting these protesters who were violent. Now, unfortunately, her army and her security services killed some people. Now, that was terrible. There's no doubt about it. It was horrible. Any human life loss is terrible and wrong. But in the process, this thing escalated. And there were Muslim Brotherhood friendly entities like the Jamaat-e-Islami that participated in this coup. And they went further and further onto the capital. And Sheikh Hasina had to leave because her life was in danger. And without going into the whole history of Bangladesh, maybe I can answer it in a separate question. The Awami League, which was a party in power in Bangladesh, they have historically dealt with radical Islamists that have tried to kill them and exterminate them simply because they believe in liberal, secular, tolerant values. And many of the minorities of the Awami League, many of Bangladesh's minorities, Hindus, Christians, Jews, Buddhists, that they tend to make up the Awami League. They have been facing this kind of persecution for decades, and they've got a lot of problems, okay? So Hasina was thrown out. And then what happened is there was a chaos, anarchy. And the Hindu minority ended up getting persecuted. Jamaat-e-Islami was released from prison. And also what happened was that there was an affiliate to Al-Qaeda, there's a leader, I forget the gentleman's name, but this guy was freed from prison. Now you must be wondering, okay, who is releasing these bad guys out of prison, if I can use the term? Guy called Muhammad Yunus. Now who is Muhammad Yunus? Muhammad Yunus, as you guys know, is that micro lender guy. He's the Nobel Peace Prize winner. But interestingly, Muhammad Yunus is a friend of the Clintons. And he has given a lot of money to the Clinton Foundation. And what's interesting is, tying it back to Kamala, is that under Biden-Harris, going back to 2021, excuse me, they have been attacking the government of Bangladesh and criticizing them rampantly, nonstop, over human rights issues. The Treasury Department sanctioned the RAB, which is a rapid battalion force. It's a security force that goes against ISIS, Al-Qaeda, radical Islamist elements. And it's interesting because this security force was trained and financed by the West, actually. And Biden-Harris had actually viewed them as a hostile force that was violating the human rights of people. And what's interesting is that they sanctioned this entity. They also threatened to sanction Sheikh Hasina and her family over election improprieties and over human rights abuses, visa restrictions, essentially. They also platformed a lot of radical Islamist voices, the State Department, Treasury Department, USCIRF, with their reports. USCIRF is a body that essentially talks about global religious liberty and what's going on in other countries of the world. And the Biden-Harris government, they platform these radicals who are hostile to Hasina. And if you read this Indian news organization, the Sunday Guardian, they talk about how there's been documents uncovered where Ned, and there's a Republican Institute, not the Republican Party, but there's like you probably know, it's like a Republican Institute. It's like an international NGO. It's based in Washington. They have been funding or assisting opposition voices in Bangladesh and platforming them and giving them a voice. So our government has been intervening in the internal affairs of Bangladesh. And so they did a slow grind of pressure on Bangladesh, on the government of Hasina. They put a lot of pressure on her, embarrassed her, humiliated her, savaged her in the public. There was like economic aid deprived to Bangladesh, trade that was hindered. And so when Hasina was facing this student protest, a lot of the hate was built up from years and years past. And so in a way, Biden-Harris brought about this coup in Bangladesh through their actions, through NED, through the Republican Institute, through their proxies in the media in Bangladesh, through their sanctions. And Mohammed Yunus just coincidentally happened to be the next prime minister. Very interesting stuff. I guess it pays to be a loyal ally of the Democratic Party. And this is Kamala Harris's record. She owns it.
Well, this fits what I wrote about her being, the product of the same forces that brought us the Hillary Clinton State Department, that want to align with Al-Qaeda and extremist Wahhabi elements in order to spread chaos, in order to resist geopolitical rivals. And it seems like this government in Bangladesh that was somewhat independent was seen as a target. And so extremist elements were fomented and it was brought down. And it seems like India is also seen as a government that wouldn't go all in with the United States against Russia, that had some disagreements with the United States. And, Modi does his own thing. I mean, sometimes he'll negotiate with the United States and work with the United States against China. Other times he'll work with Russia and China against the United States. And they don't seem to like that. They don't want that.
Absolutely. I think so. And, I always make the point. It's not America. It's not the American people. It's not even the entirety of the government. It's the select deep state that Vivek Ramaswamy, Tulsi Gabbard, President Trump, RFK Jr. is talking about. It's this deep state of actors that they're not transparent. They can't be defeated in the polls because they're not elected. They're unelected. These are the people we're specifically talking about. These are the problem actors.
Yeah, and they're not really loyal to the United States. They're part of this kind of international apparatus that's about kind of defending an international financial system, and they really don't care about the future of this country. And that's why that slogan "America First," is so important, right? Because it's America has been left behind. If you go throughout this country, you'll see roads and bridges that are falling apart, but we want to spend $100 billion. How many billions of dollars have we piled into Ukraine? I mean, what good does that do average Americans? And what good would it do to get the United States involved in this conflict? India, Kashmir. I mean, how would that benefit America to get involved in that? Would that make life better for us in any way?
Absolutely, you're right. And I have quite a lot more to share with you and your viewers.
Go ahead, please.
I'm very, very grateful, Caleb, that you give me this opportunity, because I've been attempting so hard to speak to a more mainstream American audience. A lot of my information has been shared amongst the Indian American diaspora media, Indian media. So what's interesting is that now going back to 2019, so what I noticed was very interesting. Kamala had said this remark. Behind her was a gentleman that I had seen before. I knew his face. I know this guy. I know who he is. Guy is called Dr. Asif Mahmood. Now, who's Dr. Asif Mahmood? Who is he? Guy is in the backstage next to Kamala. He's a Pakistani origin physician. He's, interesting fellow. What makes it interesting about it? What makes him very interesting is that he's a fundraiser for Kamala Harris. Top donor, one of the top donors for Kamala Harris. And he has been lavishly praised by Kamala over the many years for helping her get a lot of money, a lot of cash. I'm like wondering, like, who is this guy? Why is he so? Why does Kamala fawn over Dr. Asif Mahmood? So I did some searching, all right, and I called a lot of people, I talked to a lot of journalists. Turns out this guy is a commissioner on USCIRF. He was appointed on the board. Okay, fine, big deal. He, in 2019, led a whole parade about India's governance of Kashmir. He had a lot to say, a lot of stuff to say, whatever. But here's the interesting part. This guy is very focused on the events and affairs of Pakistan. And it gets more interesting. So why is this guy so obsessed with Pakistan? I mean, we can't just say because he's Pakistani origin, therefore he's going to be obsessed with Pakistan. No, we cannot be so trivial, cannot be reductivist and also racist, or can't be bigoted. Or I mean, so I looked into this a bit more. I find out this guy is very connected with all the major political parties of Pakistan. In fact, he visits Pakistan regularly, confers and consults with them. So then I thought, why is this guy with so much connections and access to Pakistan advising this lady, right? So he's actually had a voice in some of her campaigning materials. He's had a voice in advising her. He's had a voice with her. He's campaigned with her. He helped her a lot in the 2020 presidential primary. Gave her a lot of strategic advice, did a lot of fundraisers. And I wonder, like, if Kamala is being influenced by this gentleman on the issue of India, Pakistan, Kashmir. Did a little bit more digging. And then I find out that this guy did an event, or he worked with this group, or he contributed in some way with the Pakistani consulate of Los Angeles. And now that is the interesting thing, which is you have a gentleman who's very close to the Pakistani government, close to Pakistani political parties, advising the next, I hope not, the next president of the United States on foreign policy issues. I looked at FARA. I couldn't find whether or not he was a registered foreign agent. I did a little bit more digging to find out he was a congressional candidate. He ran in the Orange County area as a Democrat. He didn't win, but he ran. I find out that he was also close to the Clintons and the Clinton Foundation. In fact, WikiLeaks talks about some of his emails between himself and Podesta. And it's just very interesting that we've got this Pakistani asset who advises Kamala Harris and isn't a foreign lob, isn't a foreign agent, at least to the best of my knowledge, unless I can be disproven. And we've got this Kamala talking about an intervention in that region.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that, makes me wonder about things is there was a fundraiser he did in June of this year, with a guy called, I believe, Tanvir Ahmed. Now, Tanvir Ahmed is a very rich Pakistani American. He owns a bunch of restaurants, and that's fine, good for him. His brother, from what I read, is a general in Pakistan. And apparently, this Tanvir guy, he has helped the government of Pakistan with a lot of their infrastructure projects. So it's basically like he's helped out with their corporations and their companies, and they're kind of close to the Pakistani state. So I just noticed this preponderance of Pakistani influence operatives with Kamala Harris. Now, I'm not saying they're ISI, but I'd like to know. And I'd like to know if Kamala Harris is any way compromised or being influenced by these Pakistani influencers, Pakistani government of Pakistan influencers. It's worth finding out. It's worth knowing. And the American people deserve, to know if their next candidate is influenced by these folks.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds to me like what you're saying is that Kamala Harris is deeply tied in with these elements that are working in Southeast Asia. She's very tied in with very extreme elements, whether it's Kashmir elements, whether it's this Bangladesh stuff you've been talking about, and that she would get the United States involved. She's even used words like intervention to talk about what the United States should do, right? And I think most Americans, especially in the Trump camp, think we're way too involved in way too many places already. And so the last thing that we need is to be sticking our nose into this, and especially India, which is one of the biggest economies in the world. Why would we want to make an enemy out of India, right? You know, I mean, there's so much economic development going on there. I mean, I believe it's one of the major industrial countries, right after China. It is the second largest industrial center in the world, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is. And the fact of the matter is that, you know, we have an issue here that we talk about foreign interference all the time. We talk about we talk about all of this stuff, Russia, China, all of these groups. We're not talking about Pakistan. We're not talking about their groups in our country. And this issue, unfortunately, has fallen under the radar of a lot of folks. And I just happen to think that, you know, India is a big market for a lot of American corporations. It's a big place for our companies to export things to. We also rely greatly on our companies to make money off of those Indians. Those that we have 1 billion customers. Last thing you want to do is start a war or interfere in their politics. And the story gets more interesting. So not only is Kamala beholden, I think, to these Pakistani assets, government assets, there's also a curious thing that's going on where the Congress Party of India has been interfacing with Kamala Harris, and they've actually sent their top politicians, including the deputy chief minister of a state, to some of Kamala's events. It just makes me wonder, why is Kamala getting so wrapped up with the Congress Party of India and their top leaders? There was also like a reported story about this.
And this is the opposition party. Modi is from the BJP.
Correct.
So just so the viewers know. So she's involved with the opposition party in India. Continue.
Correct. And so that makes people wonder, is the Congress Party backing Kamala Harris? Are they trying to prop her up, help her in any way? Are they trying to assist Kamala materially? Are they trying to influence her in a way where she could be put in a position where she goes against Modi and tries to undermine that relationship?
Everything you're saying here seems to add up to her having an axe to grind against Modi, which Barack Obama did, right? If I remember correctly, Barack Obama denied a visa to Modi or something before he was elected.
It wasn't Obama. It was the visa was denied many years ago before through various lobby groups. But Obama chided Modi on human rights, democracy, liberalism in front of him, which was very disrespectful. You shouldn't criticize your friends to their face. You should do and certainly not in the public. You should do it behind the scenes, closed doors. That's how good friendships and relationships are made. You never want to embarrass your friends. You know, this is just good common sense. And Kamala did the same thing too, as a matter of fact. And so you look at this. You look at also Mina Harris's comments. You also look at Kamala Harris's outreach, faith outreach advisor. I forgot her name actually. She's a female pastor. She's one of the progressive types. This lady has criticized Modi for being a Hindu nationalist and all the same drivel of being fascistic and all of this nonsense. This is kind of like Kamala's associations with people. There's also the fact that there's a group called CARE, which is Council of American Islamic Relations. That group has historically been tied to the Muslim Brotherhood.
Yeah.
They have given quite a bit of money to Kamala's campaigns in the past. Kamala Harris has met their leaders at a mosque in Los Angeles in 2015. The concern is you've got some of these Islamist elements, got some of these Pakistani government elements. The Congress Party has a bit of a soft spot for some of the Muslim clerics who are very radical in India. So how does this tie to America? Well, it ties into America in that if we have a President Harris, we're going to have a commander-in-chief that is going to be hostile to this government in India. It's going to undermine Indo-US relations. We're going to have a government that is going to try to possibly get involved in the Kashmir conflict and start a new war, new conflict, new front. we're going to have a problem where we're going to have a person that offends the Hindus. The thing about Mina is that she also did something else that was quite inflammatory. And this is tied to Kamala's family. Again, Mina is very close to Kamala Harris. So Mina was trying to be funny and silly. She put out a meme of Ma Durga, a Hindu goddess, and she defamed her by putting the pictures of Trump, Biden, and Kamala Harris on these gods, on the god. And what's interesting is, so Ma Durga's face was replaced with Kamala Harris, and the various demons that Ma Durga was fighting was Trump, and Biden was on the side, which is a little odd. The point is this: it's an implication that Kamala is like a god. The implication is that Kamala Harris is like holy and sacred and truly magnificent beyond a mere mortal. And the point is that you're not supposed to do that to the Hindu god. I mean,
There seems to be a big thing about the woke synthetic left. They seem to want to defame anything that is sacred to anybody. We saw what they did the Last Supper. I think about like the Last Supper at the Olympics and how angry people got. And it sounds like you're describing a similar thing where they take like a very important religious painting and they slap they cut and paste the faces of American politicians on it to make a joke. And this is not being respectful of people's faith and traditions. That seems like what I'm hearing here. Absolutely. The other thing you mentioned, care. Now, the Muslim American community, it gets very confusing because after 9/11, a lot of leftists had it in their minds, oh, we got to always support any Muslims because, the U.S. government. But during the Syrian conflict, the Council of American Islamic Relations was heavily involved in working with the U.S. government to destabilize Syria and to send weapons to terrorists in Syria. And they were heavily involved. And, we have our two squad members of Congress, Rashida Tlaib, and I can't remember the other one's name. What is her name? Rashida Tlaib.
Ilhan Omar.
Ilhan Omar.
And there's AOC, right. And there's one lady in particular, African-American lady. She was defeated thanks to the contributions of AIPAC. I don't remember her name.
Well, the two Muslim members of the squad, Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, right? They're care people. They're Muslim Brotherhood.
They get a lot of support from them.
Yeah, and they are then huge supporters of U.S. military intervention in Syria. They were all over that. And then in New York City, the Muslim American community is dominated by this one woman named Linda Sarsour. Do you know that name?
Yes, I do know her. Yes, she's quite an extreme lady.
Yeah, and Linda Sarsour, after Trump bombed Syria, she had a rally. You would think she'd be having an anti-war rally because Trump's bombing a Muslim country, saying that Trump didn't bomb it enough because he's secretly working for Putin. And she gathered the Muslim American community. Basically Trump, that could have, when Trump did, take military action against Syria, that could have, escalated to a conflict with Russia. And because Russia was supporting Syria and Trump used, a huge amount of restraint in his intervention. I don't think he should have done it at all. But regardless, he exercised a huge amount of restraint. And she was out there protesting Trump. Why are you not bombing Syria to shreds to support Al-Qaeda? I mean, it's particularly wild. And Linda Sarsour in New York City, I wrote an article criticizing Linda Sarsour for Mint Press. And I have had people who will not come on this stream because of that. Their leftist personalities. I mean, she is just above criticism. She's just this sacred figure. But what's wild is Linda Sarsour, at the same time that she's basically a shill for the U.S. government and its regime change operations and the color revolution apparatus, she's also very, very much working for Israel. She bragged in there was an article about her published in the Israeli newspaper Haaretz that bragged that she went to the Women's March and she made sure that none of the Muslims at the Women's March, none of the Muslim women had any signs criticizing Israel. And she did that as a favor to the Israeli government because she wanted to line up the Muslim American community behind Donald Trump, or behind opposing Trump. I mean, she is just a U.S. government operative if there ever was one. And she's very much a care-aligned figure. And that the Muslim Brotherhood, right? It was in Egypt, and it was a religious current in Egypt that the USA started propping up against Abdel Nasser, the secular Arab national leader, right?
Correct.
And so, yeah, and that now in the Muslim world, I break it down for people. You have three major currents. Obviously, they all divide, but you have three major currents. You have the Wahhabis, that's Saudi Arabia, that's Osama bin Laden, that's Al Qaeda. They want to go back to the 1400s. They are fundamentalist Sunnis. And then you have the Shia, right? And that's Iran, and that's the Islamic Republic, that's the Islamic Revolution, et cetera. And then you have the Muslim Brotherhood, which they call the Westernized Muslims, right? And that's Turkey, that's Qatar, that's Al Jazeera. And they are the forces. They'll say things like America is more Muslim than the Muslim world. And they kind of embrace technology, but they also have a history of being tied to terrorist groups and, assassinations in Egypt. I think there was an Egyptian president who was murdered, was assassinated by them. They're notoriously and the overthrow of Gaddafi in Libya, the overthrow of the civil war in Syria. So they're kind of the softer face, whereas the Al Qaeda types, they have like the death squads, the killing. They're the ones that go in and cut off heads, etc. Whereas the Muslim Brotherhood, they kind of do the soft propaganda but they're both kind of wings of the U.S. efforts to weaponize Muslim extremism against independent governments like Modi.
Yeah, the thing is, like, the Sunni Shia thing is just a religious sectarian thing. These Islamist groups, they actually cross-pollinate in some of these different sects. I mean, I would try to keep that religion out of it, and not that you suggested this, but I would focus more on the specific doctrines. So, like, when we're looking at Muslim Brotherhood, we have to look at this Salafist ideology, the Wahhabist ideology. We have to look specific when we're looking at Al Qaeda. Again, same story. When we look at ISIS, we have to look at the Takfiri ideology, where people who are apostates, they have to, according to them, they have to perish. People who are not sufficiently Muslim or practicing Muslims, they have to perish, or they view them as imposters. So there's a lot of these differences. But with the Muslim Brotherhood, what is particularly interesting is that they have historically received financial, diplomatic support from the Anglo-Saxon powers, and they have received a lot of aid. And they have been used in the Cold War to destroy leftists. They've been used to destroy communists. They've been used to destroy working class movements. They've been used to destroy liberal movements, centrist movements, even moderate conservative movements. Jamaat-e-Islami is a group in Bangladesh. They are an affiliate of Muslim Brotherhood. These guys are a political party in Bangladesh. They're right now no longer banned. And they were banned in the first place because during the 1971 Liberation War of Bangladesh, they were responsible for the mass genocide, mass rape atrocities of Hindu Bengalis, the people of Bangladesh who are ethnically Bengali. They were responsible for their actual destruction, devastation, and slaughter. And the same Jamaat-e-Islami, when they came to power, following the death of Sheikh Hasina's father, who was a revolutionary, by the way, a left-wing revolutionary, this entity, Jamaat-Islami, they have gone after minorities. They were in power briefly in the 90s. They, again, went after Hindus. They went after minorities, Christians, Jews, Buddhists, moderate Muslims they didn't feel were sufficiently Muslim enough. They killed journalists. They killed a lot of folks. They wanted to turn Bangladesh from a secular society to an Islamic theocracy where no one is going to be privileged with rights, really any rights. And the same Jamaat is now back on the streets. They've been tied to acts of terrorism. They've been tied in a lot of terrorist plots. They've killed people, a lot of innocent civilians, that sort of thing. And they're more interested in political power. They're not like Al Qaeda, like a terrorist group, although I would argue they are terrorists. And simply because of the way they went after people and persecuted them and murdered them. And what's interesting is that Biden-Harris platformed these guys, platformed their views, their takes, and by purging Hasina through hook or crook, they have allowed this vacuum to exist. for groups like Jamaat Islami to come back to power. And when we look at the Biden-Harris foreign policy, we see what happened in Afghanistan. The Taliban took over. We got Islamists back in. We've got...
No, I will never forget during the 2016 elections. I was in DC reporting for RT, and we went to the White House. We would often go in front of the White House to ask, tourist questions, do our Vox Pops. And in front of the White House, there was a huge crowd of Egyptians, and they were there, and they were chanting, "We love Trump, we love Trump." And I went and talked to them. They were Egyptian Christians. They were Coptic Christians who were being terrorized by the Muslim Brotherhood.
Correct.
And Barack Obama had been supporting the Muslim Brotherhood, and they were out there rallying in support of Trump. And my cameraman, who was kind of a liberal, was like, how are all these brown people supporting Trump? And I said, because they're Christians, and because Obama is supporting the Muslim Brotherhood that's murdering them. A couple years ago, I also went to an event in New York City, and I learned all about a word that is very foreign to a lot of people in the United States, but I'm sure you're very familiar with the word Deobandi, right? And how Saudi Arabia has been setting up these extremist schools in India and radicalizing the Muslim community in India to try and destabilize.
100%. And what's fascinating is that our government has a long, ugly history with cooperating with these Deobandis, Salafists, Wahhabists, and we've used them and utilized them to basically destabilize many parts of the world. We've used them to, bring about the end of Yugoslavia. Saudis, the Turks, were working with us in supporting the Bosnian Islamists and radical organizations, terror organizations. We utilized them when going after the Soviet Union. We've utilized various Islamist groups, like, for example, during the whole Soviet intervention in Afghanistan, when the PDPA, I always forget the acronym, it's a Communist Party of Afghanistan. When the Soviets were there, we backed Islamists, specifically the Taliban, well, the predecessor to the Taliban, Mujahideen. We propped up a lot of differing Islamist groups that were close to the Saudis, Muslim Brotherhood elements. We and then destabilized Afghanistan. Obviously, we also exported this stuff to the Soviets. You remember the Brzezinski, how his whole thing was about forming this containment around the Soviet Union and working with Muslim countries in bringing about the destabilization of the Soviet Union and using Islamist elements. Now, obviously, I'm not an apologist for the Soviet Union, for the viewers to know, or an apologist for communism, but I do subscribe to Samuel P. Huntington's Clash of Civilizations, and having these Islamist elements, using them for your own means and ends, there's going to be blowback, and that blowback happened on September 11th. We backed these extremists, and we left Afghanistan into a shit zone, hell zone. Excuse my language. Allow these training camps to build up, and then they had the ability and firepower to train a lot of folks. They welcomed in Al Qaeda, and they groomed some of those hijackers and funded a lot of those guys and gave them the training they needed to be able to fight. And indoctrinated them, and then the rest is history. When
you listen to Trump talk, and especially when he was running in 2016, but even now when I hear Trump talk, there's a lot of people in the FBI and in the State Department and in the U.S. military who genuinely want to make sure that stuff like 9/11 never happens again, right? They genuinely want to keep Americans safe. Yeah. And then they look at U.S. foreign policy and they notice that since 9/11, we haven't been fighting Al Qaeda. We've been fighting Al Qaeda's enemies. We fought Saddam Hussein, a secular Arab nationalist who fought Al Qaeda. We overthrew Gaddafi, who offered to torture Al Qaeda people. After 9/11, Russia, China, Cuba, North Korea, all the governments, especially in the Middle East region, Libya, Syria, they were all saying, wow, we've been fighting Al Qaeda for years, United States. Now you see how bad these people are. Let's team up. Let's work together. And the United States kind of blew them off. And instead, the United States destabilized Iraq, and then those forces set up shop and we got ISIS, destabilized Syria, and we saw the results there, destabilized and overthrew the government of Libya, and that we've been acting almost as Al-Qaeda's air force, for geostrategic reasons. In the third chapter of this book that was banned from Amazon and the whole thing that blew up, I talk specifically about how Kamala Harris, that is her bread and butter. She is tied in with the very forces that ran the Hillary Clinton State Department. There was a meeting in the Hamptons in Long Island. All of Hillary Clinton's backers made a strategic decision. They said Hillary Clinton can't run again. They put their money behind Kamala Harris. Joe Biden did everything he could to not have her be the vice presidential candidate, which I talk about in my book. There's a lot of evidence of that. When Trump said at the recent debate, he said, let me let in on a little secret. He hates her. It's true, actually, right? Joe Biden did everything he could to not pick her, right? And that there's a bunch of people in the military and the Pentagon and the FBI who are like, we don't need another Arab Spring. The results of using social media, Facebook and Twitter, and the social media apparatus, the result of using that to make the Middle East explode has been disastrous, absolutely disastrous for the world. I think that there's a lot of people within our government that are looking at looking at the Ukraine situation, and they're saying whoever is behind Kamala Harris, they may have a lot of support on mainstream TV, but they're nuts. I mean, the implications are dangerous. And you're describing what could happen, what's already happening in Bangladesh, what could happen in Kashmir and other parts of Southeast Asia. She represents this global chaos faction.
Yeah, it's South Asia, to be more precise. But
Okay.
yeah, absolutely. And the fact of the matter is that we've got this Kamala Harris, who's very reckless and dangerous with the way she makes remarks. I mean, these words matter. And when I look at who endorsed her, Liz Cheney, Dick Cheney, 200 staffers who worked for Romney, McCain, I believe the other one was Bush, if I'm not mistaken. I look at all of these, neocons that have supported her, and it just makes me wonder, this Kamala Harris person, it makes me wonder, like, what is her foreign policy going to be like? I've looked at this Philip Gordon, her national security advisor. Now, he's written books where he's been critical of U.S. actions in Iraq. He's been critical of interventionism. But when I look at Kamala Harris's, what was it, 92%, what was it, hiring rate? What is that? I forget the specific term, but basically, she's never been able to keep her staffers long enough.
Right.
So even if Philip Gordon, her national security advisor, is a little bit more dove-ish, sort of, it doesn't matter because he'll probably be removed anyway. And when I look at all of those neocons backing her, and I wonder, is this woman going to be a problem for our country? Is she going to be a threat for our country? Is she going to be putting us in wars, sending our men and women off to die in a conflict that we didn't vote for? When I look at her foreign policy section, it's scant. There's barely anything in there. You don't know much. When I look at the people
spot run, right?
Right. And when you look at what she believes and who she endorsed, when you look at who's endorsed her, I wonder if they know more about her foreign policy than you and I. And so that gets me thinking, that is that what the future is going to look like under a Kamala Harris? There's some other interesting things about this Kamala Harris. She had a conversation with Zelensky during the Munich conference prior to Russia's intervention in the Donbass region. You wonder, did Kamala try to stop Zelensky before he talked about Ukraine having nukes? Like he said in encoded language. Did Kamala Harris try to deter him from saying that, or did she encourage him to say that? It makes you wonder what is in the intentions of Kamala Harris. There's an ongoing problem now also in our State Department, Defense Department. It was reported by the Financial Times, where the Defense Department did not want long-range missiles used in Ukraine, Russia, and our State Department wanted it to, which I thought is very weird, because you would think the State Department is the Department of Diplomacy, They try to bring, cooler heads to the table, peace, stability, and they're the ones cheering for war. They're like a propaganda ministry for war. You might as well call them the Ministry of War. And honestly, they're like very, I don't know, like they're just all hawks in there, and they're pushing all of this mumbo jumbo about how there'll be little consequences to attacking, the deep parts of Russia. And President Putin has talked about that. You attack Russia in this way, we're going to see this as war on NATO, as a war with NATO. And Biden was asked about it, and he said he could care less, something to that effect. And Ukro-Nazis, the Ukro-fascists, they keep saying the same thing. Oh, Putin has fake red lines, fake red lines. Well, no, I don't think so. WikiLeaks revealed that one of Obama's foreign policy advisors actually said that Ukraine is a red line for Russia. And if you get them into NATO or instigate Russia with Ukraine, that the Russians will do something about it. They're not going to just let it stand. So, and I'm looking at Kamala and I'm listening to her speeches, Democratic National Convention. She parroted a lot of the primacist perspectives and talked about the goodness of NATO, the goodness of what they're doing in Ukraine. So we're gonna get a world war under Kamala Harris. Yeah. Make no mistake about it. And with her associations with Islamist elements who liked the color revolutions, who promoted the Arab Spring, with her association with these possibly Pakistani government operatives who all want intervention, there's a lot of pressure on her to act as a hawk.
Well, let me ask you, I guess, as we start to wrap up here, but we'd definitely love to have you back. I mean, you're very knowledgeable, and I mean, our audience is loving you. I don't know if you're seeing the chat, but they're loving everything you have to say. They're being very enlightened. Thank you for sharing your deep knowledge of this situation. But I met you at the Rage Against the War Machine rally. Yeah. And there's going to be another one pretty soon. And I'm proud to say we, the Center for Political Innovation, just like last time, we are sponsors of the rally. Here is our logo. That's on the official thing. You can see our little right over here. Our logo there is center. It says Pro Humanity, Pro Growth, Center for Political Innovation. Right next to Liberty Speaks, between the People's Party and Liberty Speaks. There we are. Are you going to be there this time?
I'm going to be. And I have a personal, humble request. If Angela happens to watch this show, I would be honored if she would consider me as a speaker, simply because I am trying to encourage voters in our country to support the party of peace, which is, well, the candidate of peace. I can't say much for the party. I hope one day the Republican Party will be peaceful, but pro-peace. I'm hoping she'll let me speak because I am trying to get Indian Americans, Hindu Americans, Asian Americans to vote for President Trump. I don't see this as a ticket of Trump and Vance. I see this as the ticket of Trump, Tulsi Gabbard, and RFK Jr. We have to disassemble this military-industrial complex in a way where we can get it to work for the American people, not for the American elite who are seeking perpetual warfare and mass energy extraction, and all of these fights to get us to be the unipolar. I mean, the fact is that the world is changing. America is unfortunately dealing with a lot of problems at home: drug crisis, veterans under bridges, healthcare not being adequate. We've got a lot of taxes. We've got bureaucracies that don't work very well. We've got social systems that are broken and inept. We've got just a lot of structural problems with our airports, aviation safety, rail safety. We've got bankers who are not being regulated properly. I don't know. It's not a good time right now in America, and our elites are focused on maintaining the unipolarity, the unipolar world, and America being on the top. And so I request you, Caleb, and the viewers, is to lobby for me, advocate for me, so I can speak on this event, Rage Against the War Machine, because I want to expand the Republican tent to these wonderful voters. I'd like to speak about peace. It matters to us as practitioners of Hinduism. We believe in ahimsa, nonviolence, and we want to see a world that is stable. We want America not to decline, but we want America to make the necessary provisions to prepare herself for a multipolar world where we can live in peace, in harmony with each other, with everyone. The way Nixon was able to go to China, I'm hoping President Trump can go to North Korea again, make friends and peace with Kim, make friends and peace with Putin, make friends and peace with Xi, stabilize the homeland, protect the homeland, avert war, bring about global stability, harmony, try to bring these dollars back at home from our overseas bases if we can. You got to vote for Trump. He's a candidate of peace.
Yeah.
This is not about transgendered washrooms. It's not about cats or dogs. This is not about Kamala Harris's gimmick about price controls, which won't work. This is about, do you want war? Do you want peace?
Yeah.
That's what it really is all about, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot you can criticize about Trump, but he's clearly the better candidate in my view. I mean, it's very clear, and it's funny because usually I would have felt, historically the Democrats were slightly better, but not in this case. I mean, in this case, it's very, very clear that Trump is the better candidate in this election. He's the candidate who is not likely to obey the FBI. He's the candidate who is not likely to march us into World War III when deep state forces pressure him to do so. People say Donald Trump has an ego, and I hope he does, because he'll want to be remembered in history as a good leader and not the guy who launched World War III. So his ego will hold him to high standards. I think his ego took him to North Korea to do the great thing he did. And I think he's going to continue that when he gets into office. He continues bragging about it. So I'm very hopeful.
And if I could say one or two more things,
go ahead. Yeah.
People comment and they tell me things. Oh, Trump's not progressive. He's very progressive. His transition team member, Tulsi Gabbard, is Hindu. He's got Vivek Ramaswamy, who's helping him on the issues on economy. I recently met with Vivek Ramaswamy. He wants to dismantle the deep state. He wants to see accountability in the system. There's a good chance he'll be in the next administration, and he wants peace. He was one of the only presidential candidates besides President Trump to actually talk about the Ukrainian Nazi problem. Mm-hmm. This man will probably, I'm hoping, maybe, will be in the next government, next administration, and he's Hindu. And I see President Trump making good strides in outreaching to different religious groups in our country. And one other thing I want to say is that in 1976, a young Donald Trump actually helped ISKCON, which is the Hare Krishnas, with getting floats for their religious festivities in New York City, and he helped them out with office space. Very generous man. This guy's got a heart of gold. It's just that the media paints him as otherwise, and we've got to look at policies. We've got to look at records. 4 years, President Trump never started a new war. Guy's got a consistent record, got a consistent history. I think we have to absolutely focus on this as much as possible. We've got to do something.
Very good. Well, thank you for joining us. Is there a website for your organization?
Right now, we're building it. Okay. But for now, I ask everybody to consider following me at my Twitter. So at UTSAVSANDUJA. So Utsav Sanduja. So that's my handle.
And put it on the screen right there. Great. That's correct, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. Very good.
Hope to talk to everybody. Hope to cooperate with everybody. And let's build a peaceful world, one where we can love each other and cooperate with each other, build a better world. Let's build some good economic systems. Let's get workers to be in happiness. Let's talk about real issues. Let's talk about healthcare. Let's talk about the environment. Let's talk about climate. Let's talk about what mothers and fathers are going through in terms of raising children. Let's not have another debate on the next war we're entering. Let's move on from this.
Sounds good. Well, thank you very much, and I'm sure we'll have you back. Always a pleasure. Great conversation. I learned a lot. Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, that was a great conversation. I was glad to introduce you all to my friend Utsav. That was really, really great. So